Thank you for coming to our session. We're a bit of a packed house here, which is nice to see. So I will introduce myself. My name is Sharon Farrell, and I work for the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq with the Mi'kmaq Cultural Center Project. I'm a curatorial assistant, which is a fancy way to say I'm a researcher and archaeologist. So I kind of fly both sides. So I don't know how much people know about our project, but we'll go into that piece. And we're growing vocabularies. Let's switch it over to a co-worker, Ramona.
Hi, Gwen. I'm Ramona Morris. I look over BMOA to work part-time. They invited me to this event. But yeah, that's all for me.
Good everyone, I'm Leah Rosenmeyer. I also work at BMOA and I do research and planning too.
Okay, so this big crowd. All right. So some people have heard a little bit about people going to DC in the last year. I know a couple people have said, oh, could we come along or whatnot, or just wanting to know what's going on. So Leah was going to do the introduction about how this project actually came to be. I will talk a little bit about where this information is going to go.
Can you speak louder, Sharon?
Oh, sister. I'm nervous. I'm like sweating a little bit. Sorry, guys. And then Ramona, who's contracted to do the project, she's going to go into a little bit about the sheets that we have out, and hopefully people will get a chance to have a look, write on it. These are all draft stuff. Nothing is set in stone at all. We're just going to go and have a little bit of fun at the later part of our session. Sound good? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Leah.
Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm just going to let you know where this project came from. As Sharon said, there were 2 trips of 10 people who went to Washington, D.C. to the National Museum of the American Indian, which is one of the many Smithsonian institutions. And there are some really, really important Mi'kmaq collections that are there. And we just worked with collections and the old records in the museum and all the knowledge in the room, and we just grew words. So we looked at old words that were recorded 100 years ago. We talked about new words. It was just a sort of great big, it was almost like a big tagging exercise. Along with that came lots of stories and lots of other information. So we just want to share that with you today. And then as Sharon said, all of these sheets are draft. So we have the ability to create a new and final set, and we're looking for your input and anything you want to contribute to that process. I want to say that the project was from the start a partnership with Mi'kmaq Matnaway. Mi'kmaq Bird is a very small staff, and we do have a couple of speakers. We don't have any transliterators on staff. But we could not have done this without MK and the language experts that came, and they've just been amazing partners through the whole thing, really working with us through everything. So a huge shout out to them.
Sure. Leah, before you say anything.
Yeah.
So the collections that is in Washington, do you guys ever see this book?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there is pictures taken of people here in the 1930s. So an anthropologist actually came down, Frederic Johnson his name was. So he came down, he lived down here. His mission was to learn about the Mi'kmaq people, the language, the culture, and Sitgoy. So he took pictures, he lived in Eskizoni, he went to Conn River, and they ended up creating this book. Leah was, Mi'kmaq was a part of it. So a lot of the stuff that's there at the Smithsonian Resource Center, he took it, I don't want to say took it, but there's been stories. He brought it. So every time he took a picture, he'd take an artifact, he'd write a note down, and then he sent it to Washington. That's where he worked at the museum. So they ended up putting it in the resource center. So that's where a bunch of our artifacts are there. It wasn't only Johnson, the anthropologist, but Wallace and Wallace. You guys ever hear of Wallace and Wallace?
Yes.
they also came down. So Wallace came down like 1910 to like 1950. Frederic Johnson was like 1930. Yeah. So that's why the stuff is there if you guys are. And the Mi'kmaq de Bert's mission, they're going to be opening up a facility, kind of like a museum, a big museum. So their mission is to bring our stuff back home. So the whole point is, am I taking your guys?
No, I love it. So let's hear someone else say it.
So the mission is when they bring stuff home into the museums, that's where all these words are going to go. Like, it's going to go into a database. So Loinus, if you go into the museum, and if you're looking for Loinus to get if you're going to go look for a snowshoe, if you type in, you know, sometimes when you're Google searching or searching something in the museum, you're thinking, how would they say it? So it's kind of like that. So we're going to try to figure out all the words that are connected to snowshoe, anything, and they're going to put it into a database. So if you go to Mi'kmaq de Bert, then a museum, if you see like snowshoe, you can type in anything, and any word that connects to it, words, stories, badam baskoy, then it'll all come up. Okay, now you can go.
Fantastic.
So you've had the summary, and I'm just going to give a little detail to what it is. So part of the challenge at Mi'kmaq de Bert is that it's been a long process of planning for those of you who aren't familiar with it. So we're closing in almost on 20 years of planning. So it's been a very long process, and we've done a lot of work towards it. But one of the things we've known that whole time is we didn't want Mi'kmaq de Bert to be a conventional museum, and we're sort of always carrying that question in our mind about, are we using museum language? Are we using other language? What words do we want to be? How do we want to be thinking about collections? How do we want to be talking about them? That's sort of always in our mind. And I put this slide in at the beginning just because it's a real touchstone for our staff. So this was just our Mi'kmaq de Bert staff sitting around the table, and we took some images, and most of these actually are from the Smithsonian, but this is the de Bert collection that's at the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau. And we just said, okay, what are all the words that come to mind? And most of the words that are on the sheet you won't find in a conventional museum database. This isn't what they care about. They're not recording in Mi'kmaq most of the time, and not that they don't want to, but that relationship's just not there. But there's also a lot of experience here. People talked about their grandmothers, people talked about having tea in the kitchen, people talked about arthritis, roadkill. You know, there's all these pieces in the words that came out just from working with our staff. And we sort of said to ourselves, okay, if we're going to create some way to carry this forward, what is that going to look like? And it's really, this is sort of was the beginning of scoping out how we wanted to do things. So from this sort of creative, and for us it was a fun process, we ended up with a really boring database. But all those words have to be organized in some way. So we're collecting information on objects, both digital objects now and actual physical objects, people and organizations, places, and then we have what's called our knowledge table, and that's almost like a little Wikipedia inside the database. So it will have records, for example, on centralization. So if there's an object that's related to centralization, the database will link it. This is the most boring part of the conversation, by the way. And well, the database, I showed you a real screen. This is actually what the database does. So this is a picture of Charlotte Wilmot, who is from Millbrook. And we would have a record both for Charlotte, but also for the digital image of her. But in our system, we can relate out who Charlotte was and some of about her life with collections that were hers. So these collections are at husband Charlie. So, and each of these would lead anyone who was trying to understand out to other pieces. And then, as I mentioned, they would also be connected to the knowledge table. So she would be. So, for example, I mentioned centralizations, but also she has some really little beads that Gerald and Sharon in particular have done some research on. So we have some information about these beads. They help with timing and origin, and we see them a lot. They seem to have meaning for her. But also on her pouch, which you can see here, is Mimigage. So there'll be a record for Mimigage. So if you want to know where are Mimigage showing up, you can actually go into the Mimigage record and then go out from there. And then accessions. So Ramona mentioned Frederic Johnson, who was in 7 Mi'kmaq communities in between 1930 and 31. But there are also collections of Charlotte's at the Nova Scotia Museum. So you can go in for a certain, you can go in and try to understand a certain person's life, but also see where things are that are related to her. So this is the goal. This is sort of the concept of the system that looks super boring, but then we're getting there. It'll be. The other thing that's happening is that we're really trying to have things be accurate. So for any of you who have searched it on eBay or Amazon or any of those kinds of systems, if you search for the same thing in 2 different ways, you're likely to get different results. And in our system, we want you to be able to search for the same thing and get the same result. So this is just an example from the Canadian Encyclopedia. It's just an online, very nationwide. But if you search Mi'kmaq in the Canadian Encyclopedia, you will come out with a record on Mi'kmaq people. If you search Micmac, your first return is a record about Pierre Maillard. So we don't want that, right? We want this to all circle back to here. So, and how that relates to all the words on the table is, if someone searches canoe, we want them to come back with Gwitton. If you search Gwitton, you should also come back with that same record. But there may be other terms that would be used, and we want all of those search terms to come back into the same place. Similarly, it will be a little corrective. So we don't really refer to moccasins as slippers, but some people are going to search that. So if someone searches slippers, they're going to return the record for moccasins. So it's gently corrective in that way. Finally, I just wanted to say that in some ways it's good to be at the Smithsonian. They have a lot of resources, and particularly more recently, they've been very receptive and extremely warm and welcoming to the visits that we've had. But we're not there because it's the Smithsonian. We're there because of what Ramona said earlier, which is that we have an ability with the collections that are at the National Museum of the American Indian to connect collections with communities and even to specific families. And in a lot of museum collections, that record is not there. You might get Mi'kmaq, you might get Nova Scotia, you sometimes get Eastern Algonquian, you sometimes get Eastern Canada, but very rarely do you get Maggie MacLeod Gould and Mary Jane Gould from the Smithsonian in 1930. That's an unusual kind of record. So we're at these collections because we can do that piece and try to connect back to communities and to families. So this is what we ended up with, and we weren't sure how this was all going to work today. So you can see where we've ended up with. We did put this in because just in the last couple of weeks, the museum took digital scans of 2 of an old prayer book and an old hymnal, one from Pictou Landing and one from St. Megany. And those are available for download off our website now. They're also at our booth, and they're our giveaway for today. So we have 5 copies on USBs to give away for the takeaway. But if you're not in the giveaway, just go to the website. You can download your own copy. And then I just want to say that some of the data stuff seems really boring and kind of detailed, and it's not super fun and exciting. But it really does impact everything we will do at Mi'kmaq. So it impacts our community outreach, our visitor programs, all of our exhibit development, and it helps us take better care of the collections. So there is a piece that's sort of dry about the whole thing, but for those of us who work on this all the time, it's really, really important. And it's at the heart of being sure Mi'kmaq reflects Mi'kmaq experience and Mi'kmaq knowledge and Mi'kmaq language as opposed to just a conventional museum system. And I'm done.
That's pretty good. So I'll talk a little bit more about the database just because we couldn't get something off the shelf. So we're trying to do Mi'kmaq concepts and Mi'kmaq words and Mi'kmaq life in a Western structure. So as we all know, it's very hard to do. So me and Leah actually spent 2 years almost, if not 3, to build the database to accomplish what we are trying to do. And unfortunately, we have to pick one word. there has to be one word for it to be searchable. But how they came back and they called it non-preferred terms, or the other words that people could search, like the keywords. Think about the keyword searches that we do. But for us, it's like, well, who's to say what's more preferred than somebody else's? If somebody writes or spells a little different, we want to make sure that they can search and make sure they can get the return back. So we made them change it to other search terms. So we're not saying your word isn't good, because we're not about saying what's what. The only problem is we do have to drill down to one word. It has to be unique. So we're kind of forced to do the things that we don't want to, but we're trying to make it work in this system. So I'm gonna quickly talk about our visit. And some people are here who are on our visit. Sister Dorothy is there. Alwyn is here. Who else is here?
Ramona.
Ramona's here. Leah's here. I went. How do I do this?
Hit escape.
I did once. I did once. Oh wait, no, it's down here.
Get the picture.
I don't use Max, guys. See? Oh my goodness. Where's the other one? We just pushed the escape like several times.
What do you want to do? Oh, you took it off.
Sorry. All right.
Oh, yes.
Okay, here's our first group from November. Lovely. We have Beverly Jador, Barbara Sillaboy, Yolanda Denny, Mary Ellen Gugu. This is our graphic facilitator, Cora Melanson, so she did all the graphic sheets. Then Phyllis Gugu, that's me, it's Ramona, and our boss, Tim Bernard. So that was us in the curatorial space. So the artifacts live in a building that's not in the mall, the National Mall, where all the Smithsonian buildings are, the air and space, the natural history. This facility here holds, I can't remember the number.
800,000
There we go.
plus 800,000 artifacts from North America.
From North America, like all the Americas.
First
Yeah,
Nation.
all First Nation stuff.
Huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
South America, all the Americas. So here we are in the collections, and here's the book that Ramona, here's the Let Us Remember the Old Mi'kmaq. These are featured in that book. So to see, there's a picture of Mary Josephine wearing this, and you can tell it's a checkered, but we had no idea what color it is. There it is right there. And we also had some staff there. That's Tara's book. She was really great. So our second group, we have Joe Gugu, Alan Jador, Corey again, Sister Dorothy, Michelle Marshall Johnson, Ramona again, me again, and Blair. They're cool. So these were big groups. There's a lot of people to bring. But we were talking this morning about how important it is to bring the collection back, because every visit is different. And we try to bring people, we always bring elders, and every conversation is different. Imagine what the conversation would be like if we had the collection here, and people could come. They can come to DeBerg, come for a day, come look at the things from your community, from your ancestors. So that's the goal. So this is some of the stacking storage. That's Alwyn taking a selfie. It was a good time, but you know, it was very emotional. When you get into this space, it really hits you that there's like a lot of stuff from here. And they've taken great care, great care. But it's really time. It's time for it to come home. So we drew up some of the ones that we had a lot of conversations about. Ramona, where's that one? That's on the table. So somebody's already come in and put a tag on, and this is exactly what we want. People's memories, people's words they know, people they know who are important to the topic, anything that comes to mind. It's like a complete brainstorm. Oops. So even while Nelson is doing a talk today for it, there's two sets down in DC. So this is Tasba, the student. We asked her to measure them because we wanted the correct measurements, and she's provided them. We have research from what's this one called again? I have it written down. This is the Games of North American Indians, actually. It's a big volume that I found online. Yes, by Stuart Cullen from 1709. And this is from 1930, Johnson's notes. So we're trying to compile all this information so that people can make the connections, add their own connections. You know, like something that you heard or a report. When the database is live, everybody will be able to have input. This is our knowledge. We own it. So let's do what we want with it. Let's make connections that people don't know. Let's find words that people have forgot. That's the whole point. And then they played with Walk This. This was over 100-year-old set, and they let us play it. So we have a video actually. We put up this set to show people because it's a little different, as people can see. And these are from Wallace and Wallace book. And he calls it a freestyle design made by a young man at Pictou, Nova Scotia. And he says he sees sails and canoes and a flagpole in the front of these ones. But in 2012, Gerald Globe, who a lot of people know Gerald, he actually saw Cape Split in the Bay of Fundy, and Blomidon is down here. So he's seeing it could be the legends being mapped out on the dice, because legends are abounding in the Bay of Fundy, or they could be placeholders, but he had that knowledge. The guy who wrote the book in 1955, he didn't know nothing. He just thought they were nice. This is what I see. But we have the knowledge in community, and the point is to get that knowledge to the things that are away right now. And after this one, I'm going to shut up, I promise. But this is really fun. I don't know if the sound's on here. Can I play it? How do I play it? Where's the thingy? There it is.
It's too loud.
Sorry.
Meanwhile, the museum staff's waiting for the bowl to,
To crack, but they.
What kind of wood was that?
That one I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Not very sound.
That's all I remember.
Oh, yes.
So, who negotiates with who when you're trying to repatriate objects
Well,
from one country to another? Who
So-
has that authority, right?
Leah would speak to that. She was part of the repatriation in the States and
yeah, although that wouldn't figure. I worked in repatriation before I came to BMOA 20 years ago in the States, but that won't figure here. So what we're working towards with the NMAI is right now they have two. We would be the first international long-term loan. So a lot of times there's no legal framework right now there's no repatriation law in Canada, there's one in the United States, although it's very partial. And so what we're working towards is we're very explicit with them about it, a 10 to 20 year long loan that will then be renewed. So, and if Tim's not here, I think he was on his way, but when Tim talks about it, he says once they're here, we'll see what happens. But it's not fully satisfying. It won't be everything, but it will be the majority. And they know that we're looking at most of the collection. We've sent them loan lists for things, and so they are the only museum I know of that are working on these long-term agreements. And so they're basically long-term curation agreements between Mi'kmaq de Burt and the Smithsonian. So we'll keep people updated. It's a very unfortunately long process. All the objects have to go through a conservation process, and then the agreements have to be finalized. But as Sharon said, we have been very clear that we want things to come home, and we've been working at that for quite a while actually. So. It would be great if there was legal change. The way the U.S. law works, there are certain kinds of objects that can come and be repatriated back to communities, but they're very specific things. It's not everything, and most of what we would want to bring home from the National Museum of the American Indian don't fall under those categories. So it's things like burial material, sacred objects, what they call objects of cultural patrimony, which are objects that were owned by the entire community. A lot of these collections are things that individuals own, and so they don't fall under that U.S. legislation. So, and for me, because I'm a little cranky about repatriation because I think it hasn't done what people meant it to do. So I think it's better to have a long-term loan with everything to come home as opposed to trying to get final transfer on a very small number of things. And I think once they're here, the argument's made that they should stay here. So. Anyway, I'm happy if you want to come to the booth if anyone wants to know where we're at or how we think the process is going to work. And then the NMAI, in terms of these kinds of relationships and discussions, unfortunately, are better than most institutions. I don't think any of this goes far enough, but they are more amenable and more cooperative than many institutions. So, we're in the middle of a discussion with the Canadian Museum of History to bring the de Burt collections back to Mi'kmaq de Burt, and that's been way too long a conversation. That's not a big collection. It's all toolstone almost, and I think that should be a no-brainer. So, but there are a lot of people working on it. There is a bill in Parliament that's making its way through. I think it's in Senate committees right now, so if that comes through. But that bill, the repatriation bill in Canada that's drafted, it's not passed, is a bill to write a strategy. It's not the policy itself. And I don't mean to sound discouraging, but it's like, as Sharon, and you can hear this, it's like all the knowledge is here, right? The knowledge is not in Washington, D.C. So when we're there, people, when Alan is reading off the hieroglyphs, the staff is like, when people are playing Waltus, that Waltus set hadn't been played in 100 years. It was good care for that object, right? So there's just this huge disconnect between what's there and all the expertise that's here in Mi'kmaq. And the longer that separation goes on, the less people will know about the collections and the things. And so you can hear, we just care about this very much, and we're working hard to fix it. It's not a perfect, it's certainly not a perfect situation, but we're working at it, and maybe at some point there will be a change. And the way I think about repatriation over a 30-year period has changed completely. Now I feel like repatriation is about giving communities the right and the ability and the opportunities to grow all that knowledge that museums get to grow now, right? So if we go to someone's researching de Burt, they go to the Canadian Museum of History. The Canadian Museum of History ends up with that knowledge as opposed to it being here. So I think the communities deserve that, obviously. So anyway, but I'm happy to talk more. And
Yes.
Tim will be here and you can talk to Tim too.
Yes, and we do have a booth downstairs if people want more information about the different things that we do and our different visits. We only have an hour, so it's kind of hard to get all the things and all the pieces in. But so I'm gonna switch it over to Ramona because there's a reason why we have the sheets on the table and up on the walls. So I will bring it over.
So my mission was I went there for basically just
Oops, sorry.
okay. So my mission was basically to listen to conversation, to write down words that I only do. And yeah, so this was all conversation based. So every time they brought something out, like the artifacts, we would start thinking, okay, so the first group, there's two groups that went. First group was Barbara, Pablo, Yolanda, me, Phyllis, and Molly Ellen. So that group was more focused on the language. So what we did was when we had an artifact up, we looked into the books, the Wallace and Wallace. You guys know, so Wallace and Wallace the book is called, there's a lot of stories in here, first-hand stories. It's the Micmacs of Eastern Canada. That's what the book is called, there's 2 copies. So they wrote down a bunch of notes. They tried to write down phonetically and also in Johnson's notes. So what we were doing is they had the artifact, they put the word on the wall, and then we were thinking, okay, so where did this word come from? How was it used? What the root word was? So yeah, so I started writing all this stuff down. So we had papers like this to go around. Everybody had paper like this. And then when I went back home, I gathered up, I took all the words and I tried to put them all on sheets. So we probably got I think 400 or 500 words. But then me digging a little bit deeper, I was like, you know what? They're trying to preserve the language, but they're also trying to preserve stories. So I decided to transcribe. And we doubled the words. It came from, the words, and then it came with the stories, which was super cool. Our second trip was a lot more, it wasn't more word-based, it was more story-based and actual people being hands-on. Because the people at the museum, they told, at the resource center, they were like, you know what, this is your guys' stuff. This stuff hasn't been touched over 100 years, 200 years. There was a basket there from 1750, hasn't been touched. It's like, it's your guys' stuff, you guys have to connect to it. That's why Ellen was able to play Waltus. So that one was more story-based. So again, the mission was to gain words. And what I found interesting and I found crazy, I was just talking to one of my friends about it the other day, I realized how much our language was watered down, how much was, I'll give an example of, this right here. So the backpack, there was a backpack there, so they called it, Frederic Johnson had snuck the line. But then people were they're like, holy man, we don't use that word anymore. We use Winjuadahane. And again, you can tell it's Wenju, it comes from a French, a French person's backpack. So we're we lost Snakalahan. We lost that word. Nobody uses that word anymore. We use Winjuadahane. So it's things like that. There was a lot of old words that they've written down. So we're like, holy man, where did that come from? What's the root word? So a lot of this is, we found a lot of old words. And this one right here, Demigan. So for us, we think Demigan, okay, is an axe, an olive an axe. But Demigan is only the blade of an axe. So we lost the word of the whole axe, Wilnuguan is the actual, the blade of it, I guess, yeah. So I was like, holy man. And then how the conversations were going, okay, so we were talking about hammerstone. Hammerstone was used to chop wood, so Ilsachtege, not one using a hammerstone. So when we're talking about Ilsachtege, then our conversation kind of went to you know the circle that's at Bodlodek, that the mom going to get it. So we start talking about that. So, you know, Gigadeska 6, we start talking about words like that. So it went from Hammerstone to kind of like the circle at Bodlodek. So that's how our conversations were going, how we were like, okay, so this connected with this. So the mission, Nige, this is the words that we got, the two groups got, and we're gonna go to in communities. So we're gonna go to different communities, and we're gonna bring this stuff, and if anybody has their input, because now, if anybody has words that go with, you know, connecting to one of these, like we just want to add more language really to this. I really thought it was interesting. It was a really good experience, especially seeing how the two different groups were. One was more focused on language, like we got a lot of words from that group, and then the second one was more like experience. But then seeing how we learn by, you know, playing Waltus, and that's when I was asking questions like, how many rounds is that? Or I didn't know the difference between Waltus, the bone, dice, and Wabanahan. I didn't know that there was a difference. So it was a learning curve for me. And then like for me, Waltus, like, me again digging a little bit deeper, I was thinking like the Wabanahan and the Waltus dice that were being shown, I was like, you know what, Waltus, to me personally, I believe that Waltus wasn't a game at the beginning. You know, people used to when to foretell the future. And I was thinking maybe one of those, like how they were designed, maybe that's what it was used for. And then I started thinking like that. So yeah, so this is where this was our mission. So how much time do we have? 20 minutes. Questions?
Oh, in that bowl, was there a hole in the bottom or no?
So it got noted that didn't have a hole in the middle. And what I found interesting, there was that one bowl that they played with, it was really like bowl shaped. But the other ones were more flat. So that's when I was thinking, holy man, what if that was used for something else? Like, because, you know, yeah, but again, then my thoughts were because when this stuff was being collected, when I was reading Frederic Johnson's notes, he would write down, okay, I got a bowl, I got some bones or bone dice or whatever, but a lot of it was separated, right? So none of the Waltus and like the bones weren't together, or the sticks. So a lot of that was set, but I was thinking maybe it was used for something else like that specific one, because the rest of them were more flat.
So what kind of wood was it? You don't know?
What kind of wood was it?
Some of them are the bird's eye maple people think,
Yeah.
but we don't know.
We're not really
Yeah.
sure.
I'm not sure which one you were playing, because they all have numbers that the museums have assigned to all of them. So then we can get to the record, but I don't know the number of that one that they're playing. So sometimes they do.
What about the dice, which kind of bone did they use?
Okay, so we, when we were at the resource center, right next door was what was it called?
National Anthropological Archives.
Okay, National Anthropological Archives. So, when we were there, they have a bunch of stuff. So when we went there, we asked, you guys have anything like for Mi'kmaq people? And then they brought out a bunch of notes, like notes from like 1800s. There are some of Silas Rand's notes were there. And actually, Father Millard. So these were some of the notes that were there. We were all taking pictures. But what was cool about that, so we were, okay, what was this made of? Maybe it was made out of like a moose bone, or you know what I mean? But then when we went back on the notes that were taken like 1800s, they said you have to use caribou bone. Caribou has been extinct here since what, 1920, 1930? So that was interesting how times have changed to what they had to use. And going back to the beads of Charlotte Wilman's regalia, when we're looking at them, they were made out of bone. there was like bone slabs, like how the heck, like, did they do this? It was really, really interesting. So, yeah, any more questions? But, so yeah, transcription, stories, so Nige, if you guys just wanna look around, and it's probably gonna be crowded, but, look around some of this stuff. If you guys can think of words, you guys have any questions?
Do all in our sisters?
Sister Dorothy had a good quote. Stay sister, but she says, our ancestors' work was survival. So they did all this work to survive. Now our work is to revive it all. So reviving the artifacts, reviving the language, reviving everything that's going along with all our things. So I thought that was powerful. I think you made me cry when you said that. But yeah, so Ellen, you should give us your input on your experience, because I swear to God, every 10 minutes Ellen was like, wow. But you said, oh my God, pasikti bahale. So Ellen, you wanna?
Yeah. School Disney. So Wednesday, when we were in Washington Wednesday, we saw all these notes, and there was dictionaries, lexicons, names that I have never seen. Yeah, everybody's used to Rand, everybody's used to Vater Pacifique, everybody's used to all these Deblois or Deblois or something like that. But these names, I was like, when I walked in, but Ramona's like, Ellen, how are you doing? I'm like,
I don't know what to look at.
Ramona, look at it. It's like, oh my God. And I'm like starting to cry and everything. She's like, all right, dude, it's nothing. I'm like, okay, relax here. Like, I'm trying to relax, but there was so much of these notes. Like, one of the cards that really stood out to me, my grandmother talks about a place in Bodlo called Molesters. I think it's called Molesters. And there was one card that had the word demic meaning deep, right? The other word for demic that they used for deep was mullah. And we were even joking around, we're like, oh yes, mullah, man, like, okay, whatever. But for me, it was kind of like, holy smokes, like, because I remember asking, going on mullah sage, like, what does it mean? And nobody really kind of knew. But when I seen that card that had demic and mullah, meaning deep, now I say, that's where that word comes from. Maybe that's what it means. La bodlodik, somewhere the water where it's deep. Molasish means something to do with deep water. And I was like, holy smokes, I'm like, and we were only in that room for 1 hour looking at these lexicons and these dictionaries and stuff and these notes that ethnographers and anthropologists were looking at and writing down. And I was like, holy smokes, Kawal and Blair. And we were only in that room for 1 hour. I was like, Blair, you're coming tonight. I wish by like, you know, we gotta take like a whole day, Friday or Thursday or something, and take pictures of all these lexicons. I don't even care, man. I said, we're taking it home. And she's like, okay, like, boy, what are you talking about, Ellen? And I'm like, Blair, about reading, man. Like, we gotta take
gold
pictures.
Gold mine is what we were calling it.
That's what we were calling it, gold mine. So me, Ramona, and Blair, I said, Ramona, iPad did it. Both you was all this together. Take pictures, Ramona, but we're like taking pictures. I was like, oh man, Blair, Gika. She was like, nope, don't stop. Keep turning the pictures. I was like, but Blair, Gika, I got see club. No, keep going. And we're like taking pictures of all the books in these notepads. It was mind blowing. Oh, but the Wabnahan for me, like, it was like amazing. But the Wabnahan bones were made out of walrus tusk. And walrus tusks, you know, we don't really have walruses here. So a few weeks ago, I even had the chance to be taught by Nelson Paul how to play Wabnahan. He's one of the last people that know how to play it. And when we were in Washington, we were like, anybody know about Wabnahan? We're like, no, just whatever's written down. This is an old game. They say only men played it. We're not too sure, but that's what's written down anyway. Nelson taught me, and he said, I don't even care if it's just a men's game. I want everybody to learn. He said, we need to revive this game. So me and Nelson, we were playing at Heritage Park a few weeks ago, and we were teaching me the rules, showed me how to play Wabnahan. I was really enjoying it. But going back to Washington, seeing those dice, holding it, and then they brought that Waltus bowl out, and I was like, holy smokes, Ramona. I said, that one looks like it's like older. And I said, Goichida. I said, it made sense to me, thinking of the language and whatever, Waltus done, the bowl and all that stuff. I said, that's why really, the Louis welt this. I said, cause walchedig goy is concave, right? Walchedig goy, like walchelachtig, a puddle, or a mud puddle, walchelachtig, it's concave, right? Now when I was looking at this welt this bowl, I said, that's why the Louis welt this. And Ramona said, huh? And we're like looking at it, and I'm like giving her, that's why, and the Louis welt this, walchedig, a bowl. I said, that's why it's called that. And we're like, connecting words with other words and trying to figure out where things were coming from, why things are named the way they are. And I was just mind blown. And in this bowl, I said, I said, why is it so bowl shaped? The other ones today you see are more flat. And every single one of the Walters dice that we saw, I was even showing Blair, I said, Blair, these are like poker chips. I said, they're flat. I said, all the Walters dice you see today, they're more rounded on the bottom, right? They're kind of big. I said, Blair, these are old dice. I said, why are they all flat? They're flat, like poker chips, or really. You can stack them on top of each other, but it was almost perfect. I was like, boy, chip. No, I said, the link of Michelle. I was like, Michelle, get you go. Well, this like, we gotta test this out. But it's bugging my mind. I said, I have to see, why is the bowl that shape? Why are the dice that shape? Is there a way? Is there a reason?
They even tried other different dice.
And I was like,
these ones work better.
yeah, but really, yeah. And when we were playing the Walters with that bowl and those dice, they're like, holy smokes. The dice didn't fall off. You're not hitting your hand on the table or anything like that. But the dice are just staying in the bowl. I said, that's why.
And Joe was there too, and he was like telling us the rules, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. And he makes Walters like the traditional way. So he has 2 on to go. It takes 2 years to dry. It's already been a year. I was like, I want one. I want one of those. I was like, I want my own.
Then it was in that book. There's a step-by-step process of how to make the wigwam, and it's been bugging me for years.
Oh yeah. So coming back to the wigwam whistle. So.
Oh, you guys talked about that?
No, right now, Ellen. This is a good way to start. So the wigwam, actually, when I went to go see these guys for the job, I'll show you the picture. Okay, there I am. Anyways, the picture here is Christopher Morris, and that was my dad's grandfather. And when I was sitting there, and I'm like, holy man, I was telling them, that's my dad's grandfather. I said, building the wigwam, and they're like, the wigwam is there. And I'm like, what? Every single piece of it was there. The birch bark, the
picture
wood.
with you in the corner there.
So right here, I swear to God, this is one piece of birch bark and sewed together by spruce root. So they're huge, probably like the size of this paper. Just one piece of birch bark. And I'm like, holy man. Like, this was here since 1930? Like, how come we didn't even know about this? But, like, the connection that was there, and again, seeing how much was lost. So, Christopher Morris was a basket maker, but that's where it stopped with him. Nobody else in the family makes baskets, and I'm like, holy man, like, that's amazing. So, actually, my mom and my sister are here. When I took it back to my cousin Winston, I was like, holy, I got that lot. And he was like, do you know where that is? He was like, I got that Gumden back, look at the mountain. He's like, that's where Jolly's house is, my brother's house. He's like, that's that spot. And I'm like, what? Holy man. So Frederic Johnson actually took pictures like, but he had different like views, and you were able to see what the front looked like, where the pizza shop is, but it was just nothing, just woods and grass. But I thought that was amazing. So, and then they told us about the poles, and they're like, you guys have all the poles here? Yep. So we went up, and there's Ellen covered each pole. I'm going to make one this summer. So, like, imagine how much we learned just being there for a week, and if this stuff comes back home, how much everybody else is going to learn, how much more input people can have getting this stuff together, like especially the database. And the database isn't just going to be for BMOA de Bert. It's going to be for everybody. So it could be research, it could be anything. You guys, everybody will have access to it. But our mission, again, I'm always on a mission for you guys. So the next couple months, we're gonna do community sessions. And we're gonna bring these back again. And we're going to, we just want everybody's input. So if you guys wanna look around, if you guys can think of a word, or if you guys want to come to the community session, just a one-on-one, if you guys can think of anybody we can talk to, that'll be cool.
I got a word for ivory now too.
Oh, right, see, and like we had these like ding moments.
From what I was told, ivory is M-bite. M-bite. E-M''P-A-Y. M-bite.
Alan, tell us about what you learned about the wigwam, you were gonna say.
So, alright, so for the wigwam, like our wigwams are really different from the teepees. You know, that's not us. That's not Mi'kmaq at all. And a couple years ago, when I started working at the Member Tool School, before I started at MK, me and Jane were talking about words for wigwam and whatever. And these were the pictures that I was using. And I was under the impression this wigwam was gone. I didn't know it was in Washington. And when as soon as they said, they're like, yeah, this is Christopher Morris's wigwam. And I was like, that one right there in the book? And they're like, yeah. I was like, is it all here? And I'm like talking to the girls that were working at NMA. I was like, where's the poles? I was like, I gotta see the poles. And they're like, it's in the room. I said, take me there right now. I said, I want to go count the poles. I want to see how much there are.
How did you manage to bring it up there though?
Yeah, I know. And they're like, yeah, we can take you to the room to go see the poles. I said, yeah, that'd be great. And they're like, oh, well, let's all go. We're in the middle of something already, like a session. Baby, cut off water on it. I said, I need to go see those poles. And they're like, okay, Ellen. We went up. And then I counted, I think, 57 poles. There was 14.
Plus a decorative one right here to hang stuff up.
Yeah, and the next one, that one is right here.
Right here, yeah.
Now, I counted altogether 57 poles. They used 14 poles for the structure. Right? And our teepees, our wigwams, the poles didn't cross like this. Any old pictures you see, the poles didn't cross like this at the top. They all meet up at the top. So there's different names for the poles on the inside where the bark covers those poles. Negmoil Deloisigo Bisia. As far as I know, and yeah, that's what Rand wrote down. Those poles on the inside, Bisia, Negmoil Deloisigo. And then there was another wooden hoop that they put on the inside. There was a wooden hoop right here. I think it was made out of moose wood. They made a big wooden hoop and they would tie that together with jibisco, which are spruce roots, right, or roots. And they put that around. I said, where's the moose wood? Where's the hoop? I gotta see the hoop. And they're like, it's right there. And I started piecing it together because it was broken. And I'm like,
oh my God, look how big it is,
I was like, get that remote technique. And the girls were like kind of turning red because they were like touching the stuff. And I'm like, oh, I gotta see how it looks. And then I started kind of putting things together and counted 57 poles. And then there was different names for the poles on the outside. I think those were called Glee Buddy. And our Glee Buddy Gunk. And our people were that descriptive. They were that intelligent. I just kept getting blown away by our own people. I said, you know, our people, Mi'kmaq people, were that intelligent. We were that smart. We had a name for everything. Everything was descriptive. Every name that we gave something, it was for that specific thing. That's how specific our language is, right? So it's completely amazing overall. And that trip, I was like, holy smokes. And then when we seen the birch bark strips, when some of them were long, some of them were, if you probably rolled them up, some of them will be long as this table. Yeah. And each one, at the ends, you'll see a piece of wood, like put on the ends. And I guess I'm assuming that was to prevent the birch bark from ripping. Yeah. They would put a wooden piece there, and then they would tie it on with spruce root. And I said, why did they do that? And I'm like thinking that's probably to prevent the muskie or the strips of birch bark from tearing across like this, right? Because then once that happens, that kind of ruins your whole structure for your wigwam. But that was amazing. And in their beadwork that they had a lot of women's peaked caps, like the regalia that they showed. You guys probably showed the pictures already. what me and Madonna Johnson were so amazed at when we were looking at these regalias, I was like, holy smokes, Madonna, we're like with magnifying glasses and everything, and we were so blown away because they didn't use, the beads were that small, there was, that we know of, there's no needles small enough to go through these beads. So what our people did, they would use moose hair, deer hair, whatever kind of animal hair that was tiny or small enough, they would load up those hairs with the beads, put it down, and they just tacked it down. As soon as they ran out, they get more moose hair or whatever kind of hair. And I was like, holy smokes, dude, this is all beaded with moose hair. And I was like, well, just mind blown. As you can tell, I'm even like getting all excited. It was an amazing experience to play it at Waltus. I even told Michelle, I said, 112 years, Michelle. I said, guys, that this Waltus has been in storage. I said, we just brought it back to life.
And
That was the moving part for me.
Yeah, but it was
Great
amazing
time.
how much, how they let us do it. When you
Yeah.
go to a museum, you're not allowed touching anything.
Yeah.
But then they're like, this is your guys' stuff. They need to be connected with you guys. Everything in here is alive. They take care of our stuff really, really, really
Yeah.
good. Yeah. But again,
Amazing.
back to our
Anyway, enough of-
yeah, well then, I'll wait for that. So yeah, so again, we're on our time already.
So we ran out of time, but the good thing is, our booth downstairs will have these sheets. And we're gonna hang them up, and we're gonna try to get them all up, we'll see how that goes. But people are welcome to write on them, all during this week, we'll be here till Friday. So if anybody wants to come, add a story, add a word, whatever you like, please come and visit us downstairs.
So you guys, these are the scans of the prayer book and the hymnal. So these are also downstairs if you want digital copies. We have
Anybody else?
copies on our, there's a computer downstairs, you can take them, and we have a few here to give away too.
Does anybody want to go in for the draw? Did we miss people?
Just speak my name.